Welcome you here to our Airport Authority Board. We appreciate your interest in the airport and the support that you each provide. We'll begin by asking for a motion to approve the minutes for the August 4th meeting.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as provided for the August 4th meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
David Koch, we've been massaging this project for a few months. Bring us up to date on what's happening. And
really quick update. So I apologize, little communication breakdown on last meeting, but if the meeting before we talked about the proposal, I think everybody knows what it is. It's a zero emissions vehicle grant proposal to the FAA for them to fund or 90% fund a mobile microgrid and the charging infrastructure to charge the mobile microgrid. And that would be an asset that would be owned by the Logan-Cache airport. And then Utah State would use that with their electric DA-40 fleet, and then in the future, as other electric planes come on, and they'll be able to charge it at the airport also, which we believe will facilitate adoption, or will be a big incentive for a lot of the electric vertical takeoff and landing airplanes that will come online in the next 5 years or so. And then subsequent to that, regional aircraft that are all electric. So we did, in the meantime, get back some quotes, and I think we have some pretty solid numbers for the proposal. It's about a $1.1 million proposal for the grid infrastructure improvements, including the transformer and switching gear and installation, as well as the mobile microgrid, a 500 kilowatt hour mobile microgrid. So there's several $100,000 of lithium ion battery modules included in that. So I think the next steps are, if you look at the grant guidelines, they recommend that you contact the FAA and discuss the proposal with them. There's a 2 to 3 page preliminary application that is due November 1st. So we have about 8 weeks to get that in. I talked with Chairman Kerr. So I think the next steps are in the next 2 weeks that we contact the FAA, we set up an appointment, and then maybe the Utah State guys along with Electric Power Systems, and we'll kind of support that call. The application needs to, and the contact needs to be from the airport. So Electric Power Systems and or Utah State are not eligible for the grant. It's a grant for airports. But we'd be happy to support that. And then after that preliminary discussion, we have right now about 12, 13 pages of proposal. We need to summarize down to 3 pages for the pre-application that would go in November 1st. Then after that, we'd wait and see if we make the short list. If you make the short list, then we, between now and springtime, we'd have to really sharpen our pencils and add back in a bunch of that detail, and then go from there. So that's kind of where that stands. The other thing that will be helpful, I think we talked about this, is the letters of interest that we have with Utah State and with the Logan-Cache Airport. We referenced that in the letter. I think having that support will help facilitate and bolster the proposal. So I think in the next 2 weeks, the action items are set up a meeting with the FAA, get their initial feedback, and get those letters of interest in place.
And my understanding is you reviewed those letters of interest with Taylor Sorensen.
Yes.
And you've worked out the details with him on those.
Yes, I think they just need a signature now.
Okay. So today, then our action would be to approve activating those agreements and approve contact from this body to the FAA to be actively involved in seeking that
Yeah.
grant.
Yep, I think so. And and the letter of interest is non-binding. It's non-binding for either side. It just says we're both, both parties are interested in moving this forward and bringing all electric aircraft to the Logan-Cache Airport and Utah State Fleet.
Okay.
David, could I ask a question? Can you explain what a mobile microgrid is?
Yeah, do you have a
Does it
HDMI?
rely on Logan City Power?
It will. It will draw power and charge typically overnight. Is there an HDMI I can plug in?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, picture's worth 1,000 words. So it is essentially an electric fuel truck. Let's see here.
Do you have any sense of what the potential load would be on Logan City's power?
Yeah, for one truck, we would plan to charge that with, so let me see here. Pull up the picture.
The charging would be off-peak times, though.
It would be off-peak times. It would be about a 150 kilowatt charger, so that would be the maximum load that would be drawn on the, okay, there we go. So this would be this would be the mobile microgrid truck. It would plug in overnight, and over 8 or 10 hours, it would draw up to 150 kilowatts to charge a 500 kilowatt hour truck, and so you would probably be looking at I would guess somewhere between 200 and 400 amps on a 483 phase system. So it's more than your refrigerator, but it's not exorbitant, just because you're doing it over such a long period of time.
How many kilowatts did you say?
Yeah, well, the charger would be a 150 kilowatt charger. The capacity of the truck would be 500 kilowatt hours.
500 kilowatt hours, okay. So, like 15 houses. Use about the same power as 15 houses, maybe.
Yeah, I think the service, what we're planning, so the service that we're proposing to install for for this proposal is the 1600 amp service. A house is maybe 100 amps, so it's 15, 16 houses. That's probably a good estimate, yeah.
And I have a question about the batteries. How long are they going to last? I know all the devices I have with batteries, they last a few years and then they have to be replaced.
Yeah.
Is that what we're going to have to do with this?
Really good question. So the plan for this would be to use the batteries. The batteries in here will be the same batteries that are in the EDA 40s. And so we have the potential of taking the batteries, the planes will fly for about an hour, hour and a half, but they also degrade over time. About 2 or 3 years into the life of the plane, they'll be down to 80% capacity. And it's going to start cramping your flight program time. So we'll want to switch those batteries out. Those batteries will still have 80% capacity. We can then put them into the truck and utilize them for a few more years. So the initial cost of building the truck with new batteries is high. Maintaining the truck will be relatively easy once that's
So are you saying the airport authority would not have to purchase new batteries?
That's a good question. We would have to work that out. Where the airport authority owns the mobile microgrid and the infrastructure, Utah State would own the airplanes and the batteries on the airplanes. We'd have to figure out some kind of transfer there. But it is, I think there's a incentive for Utah State, obviously, to have the mobile microgrid run. They don't have a lot of use for the batteries that can't fly a plane, so maybe there's a transference fee or something. The way I envision this is there's going to be energy as a service fee that is transferred to Utah State, and maybe it's incorporated in that, or maybe it's a transference fee or something like that. We'd have to figure that out.
Okay.
So do we foresee additional infrastructure having to go out to the airport to create this amount of?
You've met with Logan City.
Yes, we met with Logan City. So what we are proposing is the addition of this hardware. So this would include the 500 kilowatt mobile microgrid, a 1600 amp service, switching gear, trenching, installation is about $322,000. Excuse me. There's a 300 kilowatt AC DC rectifier and DC bus controller for about $56,000. There's a 150 kilowatt fast charger, which is about $54. That's really just a dispenser that hooks into the DC grid that's created by the 300 kilowatt rectifier. And then there's a transformer and connection fees. So the transformer would need to be upgraded, and then the rectifier and the switching gear and all that would need to be put in place along with the trenching.
But the available electric power is close at hand. We're not going to have to run a new main line from Green Canyon to...
No, there are actually, from my understanding, discussions with Logan City, several substations that are capable of feeding that. We would need a new transformer box located in close proximity wherever we're going to put this out on the ramp. But the 1600 amp service is about 4 or 5 times as much power as we'll need just for the one charger. It's kind of future-proofing the system so that, you know, if you add additional dispensers and, you know, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, you want to expand out the electrical charging capacity, you don't have to retrench, you don't have to add a new transformer. This kind of rolling all the infrastructure improvements into one proposal.
Okay. And I understand that, or I've assumed that part of the FAA interest is that this be a revenue generator for the airport.
I think the grant is called Zero Emissions Vehicle Grant. I think there's the primary impetus here is to get the carbon, all the IC engines reduced on the airport, reduce emissions. I don't know if I think, you know, it's in the interest that this is structured so that it is at least cost neutral for the airport or maybe a revenue generator. There's quite a bit of opportunity, and we've talked with Utah State and Aaron about reduced costs in operating an electric aircraft versus an IC engine, you know, in maintenance and fuel costs and so on and so forth. And so you know, there's an incremental cost delta that can be put into maintaining and
Similar to the flowage fee that we collect on every gallon of gas that gets pumped.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and there's really 2 mechanisms that could be thought of there. One is a power by the hour, you know, per hour of flight, or it could just be the fee that's charged on top of the kilowatt hour. So, you know, it's probably something like 13 cents a kilowatt hour is what the utility will charge. You know, so you can put a additional fee on top of that to maintain the infrastructure and update it and replace batteries when they need to be replaced, stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that good questions, but I think it's a little bit. So this is an old grant. The Zero Emissions Vehicle Grant dates back quite a while. It wasn't initially intended to put infrastructure in place for electric aircraft. It was intended to put infrastructure in place for electric buses and, you know, other vehicles, tugs, and whatever else might be on an airport. But, you know, reading through this, having that mobile microgrid, that all-electric thing, it checks all the boxes. But I think that'll be the interesting part of the discussion with the FAA is to say, hey, does this fit under the umbrella of what you're trying to do here?
And we'll be plowing new ground because
Literally and figuratively.
yeah, we're not aware of any other airport that is doing anything like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of airports that are trying to get ready for electric aircraft. Ogden Airport, for example, has, they got a grant for a general airport improvement, and they're have put in or are putting in a 4 megawatt loop into the airport, and they have in their ramps right now the conduit and everything to run the high voltage out there. So they're kind of pre-planning that. There are other airports doing that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I have a question about why we would do a mobile microgrid versus just having fixed plug-in locations. And, well, I know one answer to that is there's a grant to pay for this. But how much efficiency are we losing by charging batteries and then using those to charge other batteries versus just plugging in aircraft directly?
Yeah, really good question. So the charger that will be put in place to charge the mobile microgrid will also be capable of charging an airplane. So, but that doesn't fit under, this is a zero emissions vehicle grant, so if the kind of say, hey, this is to charge the mobile microgrid. I think the applications that the mobile microgrid fit are, one, for flight training, when you get to the point where you need to do a cross-country trip, 150 miles, you basically exhausted your, everything but your reserve to get to 150 miles. You can drive the mobile mic out there and charge it up. For those applications, there's also the application where somebody's not paying attention to the fuel gauge or the kilowatts, and they end up landing in Brigham City instead of in Logan. You can charge them up, and just the flexibility of charging on the airport in different locations, and that's probably a little bit more future application. If you have one operator here and Utah State there, you can kind of like the fuel trucks do now, is they can charge or go anywhere up and down the ramp. But it is largely put in here for the zero emissions vehicle. I think if this wasn't a zero emissions vehicle grant, it would maybe make sense to say let's put in 3 or 4 chargers instead of a mobile microgrid.
And what about the efficiency question? How much efficiency are we losing?
That's a good question. Most of the power electronics are pretty efficient, 90% plus. You do need to go from, well, in any case, you have to go to AC-DC rectification just to be able to power the electric vehicle. So that's kind of a given. The additional loss would be between the batteries and then putting it back on the vehicle. So you're probably, I'd have to look that up and talk with the technical guys, but I would say maybe 5% less efficient or something.
Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah.
And so we also have to have individuals who can drive this. I mean, if it's mobile, somebody's got to drive it to the airplane, correct? And so we have to have somebody on staff that will.
Our staff or the FBO staff,
Okay.
they're,
So we already have staff that can do this?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good questions. Any other questions? Thoughts?
What about the training requirements for people? Self-fuelers, on fuel, on fossil fuels, they have to go through special training. Is there any training that's going to be required for those that would be operating this vehicle?
Yeah, there will be. There is high voltage training. We do high voltage training for all of our employees, the maintenance people, and whoever's operating the truck will need to have high voltage training just to make sure that they understand what the safety procedures are for using the high voltage to charge.
And I assume that the FAA will monitor that training, and they will go through our training records, make sure that they're updated on an annual basis.
I assume in the future, yes. Right now, the FAA is still trying to figure out what's going on, and they're focused right now on figuring out how to certify the aircraft. So that's their big job in the next year and a half, is to get certification on the aircraft. And then we are working with Utah State and with UVU and the other schools in Utah, SUU, and Salt Lake Community College, their AMP programs, to propose a curriculum that the FAA can adopt for maintenance of electric aircraft. So I think out of that consortium and some other things, there'll be some guidance and guidelines in place, just like you have for avgas or jet fuel.
Any other questions? Is there a motion for the board to authorize signing the letter of interest and initiate contact with the FAA?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the signing of the letter of interest for the green vehicle grant and initiate contact with the FAA. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes.
Who made the motion, who seconded it?
Carl.
Dave, thank you.
Taylor?
All set? Okay.
I believe everyone got a copy of the hangar site waiting list policies and procedures.
Yes, so just to give a short little summary again, we're trying to deal with current and anticipated demand for hangar sites and manage that in a way that we can prevent people from staying on the waiting list in front of others who may be willing to build, but also afford them a reasonable chance to get a hangar site if they do want one. So this is just a list of policies of how we're going to deal with a waiting list. First, by submitting an application and paying a fee. The fee would be non-refundable. Mr. Hugo and I, he's not here, but we discussed that, and many of the other airports make their application fee non-refundable. It prevents having to keep up administratively with returning funds and keeping them in case people eventually want them back. So, and then going down to number 2, the airport administration offers hangar sites chronologically on a first-come, first-served basis based on the waiting list and based on the date they're stamped when they are received, together with the receipt of payment. And then when the waiting list applicant is next on the list, there's a process outlined here of how to contact that person and what measures we'll go through to get in touch with them to get their accept or decline response. Failure to respond within 5 business days after making a reasonable attempt of certified mail and making a phone call to their listed phone number and leaving a message. Part of this is it requires that applicants maintain accurate and updated records with the airport authorities so we are able to contact them effectively. And on a decline, we would send a certified letter advising them of the decline. They also have the option of a pass where they can be skipped and then goes to the next person after them, but they remain on the list. And to accept an offer, they would reply in the affirmative. And so this procedure, it doesn't touch on a timeline for when we would want them to construct the airport. In our previous meetings, I don't think we settled on a timeline that we could all agree on. But this is the...
Does the lease payment start immediately upon their getting kind of the contract for the?
That is something that we did talk about in Mr. Hugo and I think in past meetings as well. And the lease payments do not begin when they're selected. We can make that change.
See, without a timeline of when they have to get started, so they've got it committed, but they don't have to start paying a lease or they don't have to move in or do anything. I think we need at least one of the other.
So we discussed that in a separate agreement, aside from the waiting list policies, that we could, when they accept, then they sign that separate agreement that has a timeline and has their lease payment spelled out. And that would be separate from this.
So you'll work on
waiting
that sort of
policy.
next. That
Yes.
would be the next step. Thank you.
In some ways, I'd like to have them both together so we understand what the entire process is.
I think there's wisdom in that because we wouldn't lose consistency. I mean, if there's,
Right, because we could implement this policy tomorrow. And we don't have the other policy for 3 months or whatever. You know, I would like to have them both so we have a consistent, somebody wants to build a hangar, they have to get on this list, and then they have this paper that they have to sign once they're accepted.
I mean, what reason would there be not to have them together? I don't understand why we would need two separate.
One of the reasons to keep them separate is that if we keep the waiting list policies and procedures the same and they're publicly available, but if we want to make changes to our lease agreements, we can keep those separate and we can make the lease agreements can be adjusted as needed, and the waiting list policy would remain separate so that it maintains that consistency in application.
I guess what I was saying was I want 2 agreements, but I would like to implement them both at the same time.
I agree. I think that would be great. That when I think that would be just fine, and I can get a lease agreement drafted if you don't have one already.
We do.
So
Does the wording say something about the lease agreement has to be signed within like
No?
10
doesn't
days?
say
So maybe
anything.
we need to add a little bit of verbiage to that. Just say a lease agreement must be completed within a certain number of days of the deposit or something.
okay, yeah, that would be
Currently with the deposit.
that would be fine. That a lease agreement must be executed within 10 days of acceptance, or
Because
applicant forfeits their position.
I guess that, you know, I don't understand 1B and 4. Are they the same?
1B, pay the hangar site application fee. All applicants must make a $500 non-refundable administrative fee. And then number 4, those refer to the same payment. Number 4 is just how the fees are paid, either by check or by money order. I can add cash or card.
It says, okay.
If you want them to be able to accept cash, that's
So
something
it's
we can.
exactly the same thing, right?
Yes, number 4 is just adding a little bit of procedure to 1B.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
About number 6 and 7.
Okay,
So number 6 says applicants may not transfer, trade, or sell their position on the hangar site waiting list. If someone already has a hangar, they're allowed to transfer, trade, or sell, aren't they?
They have to negotiate a new lease if they sell. If they sell the hangar, then the whole lease is no longer valid and they have to negotiate.
I guess I'm just talking about the space. Because they can transfer, trade, or sell their hangar, which then would automatically come with the land underneath. And
I don't think we've ever had anybody remove a hangar. They've always just sold the hangar and then we negotiated a lease.
I
So-
think the point, you're just talking about the process.
yeah,
But
yeah,
this is just for new sites, correct? This is not for existing hangars?
yeah. This is new sites, but I'm just comparing it to existing sites. If we allow it with existing sites, why wouldn't we allow it with future sites? I'm just wondering, is there some concern or reason why, let's say it's a company that is in line for that and they need that for their company, and in the process of waiting for one to open up, their company sells to somebody else, and now they have to start over in line. The company that might affect them.
It states in the hangar lease agreement that they can sublease their building, but they cannot assign they sell, they cannot assign that old lease to the party.
Okay. But in this, we're not talking about a lease, we're just talking about land.
We're just
The
talking
right-
about
the
a
right to
place on the
use.
waiting list.
Yeah.
It's just a waiting list.
A waiting list to be able to get access to enter into a lease. Yeah. I'm just wondering what our concern is, why we wouldn't want to allow, is there some specific reason why we would not want to allow someone to transfer their spot on the waiting list? What's the problem with that?
I can see one challenge, and that's the fact that we don't know who to contact. If they ever come up to the top of the list, we contact, Joe, and he's transferred it to Sam. We don't have any of Sam's contact information. We don't know how to get a hold of him. He isn't able to accept because we don't know. Joe won't answer his phone. And then Sam gets mad because he says, I bought this and I'm next in line.
I
And then
would,
you monetize kind of your place in line. I just have a little, and we were trying to make it fair and sort of level the playing field, I think, with this policy. Again, does somebody get on the waiting list and pay their $500 and then think, okay, I can sell this for a couple of thousand
Yeah.
in a year or two?
I would echo that same concern.
so my question about the second one, it's kind of similar. So it says, as new hangars, number 7 is what I'm referring to now, as new hangar sites become available, existing tenants in good standing may request the opportunity to upgrade. So if somebody already has a hangar out there and they'd like to get a better one if a better spot becomes available, so they put themselves on the list to pay their fee, fill out their application, and then it says, so it says they would follow this procedure, but then it says existing tenants in this situation may not accept a new hangar site as a secondary hangar. They must vacate their existing hangar. So that sounds to me like what we're saying is, from now on, no one can have more than one hangar in the airport. Is that what we're saying? While we think about that, how many people have more than one hangar now?
Other than Utah State, there's others that have seven.
Probably,
What's that?
Other than Utah State, who has 8 hangars, I believe, that there's other individuals that have multiple hangars too.
So is that what this would do? Would this make it so that no one could add an additional hangar?
That's what it's written as right now. That's up to your discretion. If you don't want that provision, that's fine. We're happy to make that adjustment. So we can have as many hangars as you want, or you can have a limit. I know that there was a concern about, this is mainly to address hangar availability, and if just a few players are owning all the hangars and are able to gain control of all the available spots, part of the reason we did this was to make hangars more available to the public. So that's a decision that you as a board will have to make, and I'm happy to make that adjustment here in the text.
I would be concerned about limiting growth. Essentially, what we would be telling is everybody there is you're now fixed and frozen at the footprint you have now, or at least the number of hangars you have now, and you can no longer expand your operations at the airport. If USU, for example, wanted to expand, this policy wouldn't allow them to ever add a new hangar unless they gave up one.
Yeah, that wording should be changed, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, although the way I read it was that the existing hangar people would have priority over the list, as long as they complied with this. So I don't know whether that's the intent or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just need to get in line like everyone else.
Yeah.
It says they have to follow this procedure, so that's how I interpret it, is they get in line with everyone else.
It says, following the above procedure.
So just to confirm then, we are fine with our first sentence that existing tenants need to follow the exact same procedure as new tenants, and then we can scratch this last sentence of accepting new sites, and an inability to maintain their secondary.
Well, I think, I don't think you even need it, 7, because
Well,
it's for everybody in the beginning. It's like applicants must, due to the current and anticipated future demand for hangar sites and the limited availability, it is necessitated the need to establish policies and procedures regarding assignment of hangar sites. And it's just for everybody. Make sure the process grants to all individuals and entities the same opportunity to obtain a hangar site. So I don't think you even need 7.
Okay, if you
Well,
feel comfortable with that, that's.
I would agree with you that it's unnecessary, except that I like having it in there just so that there's no question about it. If somebody down the road says, well, are we allowed to, or are we not?
Well, all you have to say then is this policy applies to new and existing hangar
Yeah,
site owners.
yeah, we could either add that somewhere else or just leave the first part of 7. I would agree, though, that it's redundant. It's not necessary, but it does add clarity.
Was there a decision made there? Scratch all of 7 or part of 7 or?
Well, I would ask that we do not adopt this until we see we have the other piece.
The existing lease,
Yeah,
But
so
we
we
have-
know exactly how they work together.
okay.
Would that be okay?
I have one question about the lease charge. I understand now that we're going to charge $500 for, place them on a hangar waiting list, and then we're gonna charge for the property lease once they have been accepted. No longer we give them 1 year to get all of their building permits, the 7460-1 form approved by the FAA. They're going to be charged all these fees up front, correct?
All which fees?
Well, there's usually a year process from the time that they are approved to build before they get their building permit and they get the 7460 form from the FAA back, stating that it has been approved for hangar.
Yeah, but if you buy a lot to build a new house, I mean, you're paying for the cost of that lot, even though you may not start construction for 5 years, a year, 6 months. I mean, again, it's your, I mean, I guess you own the property versus a lease, but I think, yeah, they start paying
You
for
still
it.
pay property tax then.
I think you should
One
start
question
paying
I know
for
I'm
it.
gonna, or the new manager's gonna get, is they're gonna say, can we apply that $500 towards our property lease if they are approved?
We discussed that
I think it's
early
just an
on.
administrative fee.
Yeah,
Yeah, that fee is to pay for all the administrative costs of putting them on the list, managing them.
one of the things I think we want to avoid, and we discussed this, is the people that come in and apply for a site, sit on it for a year, and then decide not to proceed. And so someone else who was more anxious was held out of the game. And this helps incent people to be serious about the process and not just take a flyer.
Again, I don't know whether, does the existing lease have any language about, you have to start construction or at least start the permitting process by a certain time?
That came from the airport board when they approved the hangar construction. They were given a year. Now, we have 3 out at the airport right now where they requested an extension of that time, but we've gone ahead and we've also already assessed the cost of the property lease because they went beyond that year's time. So now they are paying.
But previously, you didn't charge them anything for that
Previously, we
first
didn't
year?
charge them anything until final inspection of the hangar.
I think we should change that.
I agree. I think we should charge right
'Cause
away,
again,
as
I
soon as they
mean-
sign the lease.
I would concur.
Yeah, they tie up the property and nothing happens.
Yeah, that's been a real problem now.
Yeah, so change it. Let's get something drafted to change it next meeting.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, or maybe it's part of the new lease language, but,
I have one more thought. I have a friend, he's on the waiting list for a slip up at Bear Lake in the marina. And I understand they have similar high interest and not very many spots, well, no spots available. I believe he told me that he has to pay another fee every year. He has to basically re-up his application and reconfirm that he's still interested every year. I don't know if we necessarily would want to charge another fee, but maybe that's something we would want to do, is somehow say that if you're on the list every year, you have to somehow tell us, yeah, I want to stay on the list.
maybe pay another $100 or something to
Yeah,
stay
it could be
on,
something
or,
like that,
so
too.
not the full
Yeah.
500, but.
So do a 500 initial administrative fee and then a $100 yearly
Year.
deposit,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, that way somebody has to notify us and pay us and say, yes, I want to stay on the list.
right?
Um,
Adding a dollar amount does incentivize people, and it does clarify people's thinking of whether or not they can afford a hangar, number one. If they're unwilling to pay $100 to renew their administrative fee, then that would clear things up for a lot of people, I think.
And again, the administrative fee, there is some burden on us to maintain that list going forward, even though hangar sites may not be available. We still have to maintain that list and assure its currency to avoid the kinds of issues that we've talked about, of not being able to contact somebody. And
Yeah. Yeah, if we make them basically reapply or reconfirm every year, that'll increase the chances that we'll have a fresh list.
are there other questions?
John, may I make one comment
Yes.
with regards to that? Saw something similar in the East Coast. There was a lot of, anyone will always push back on any fee, so that's just, but secondary to that, people were 5 to 10 years waiting, and the airport had done nothing to develop any new hangars. And they raised a legal question of, you're extorting us for money, you're not doing anything to provide any new hangar space on an airport. You're not going after any funding, you don't have it in your long-term plan to build new hangar spots. All you're doing is taking money from me each year. It kind of played out with, it was a negative aspect on the airport because they were not taking any proactive steps to actually generate new hangar locations. No one had a problem with the administrative fee and signing up for a list and letting them know, hey, I'm still interested. But it was the repetitive fees that they came back on the airport of, I'm fine paying $50, $100, whatever it is, but what are you doing to actually help make this become a reality? Or am I gonna be 20 years out, done with flying, and I've paid you, by this point, several $1,000s, and you never took the first step to make a new hangar spot for me?
Yeah, I definitely would agree that that we have a responsibility to serve our public, and we should be working on those types of things. But one of the questions I have is, how often does a hangar become available? How often does somebody say, I'm moving out?
Probably 2 a year.
Okay. So those would be ones, that would be one reason they could be on there, right? This would apply to both existing hangars and
That is
vacant
existing
land?
hangars, and then we've had several where, because we didn't charge a fee, they decided, well, they no longer interested in building a hangar, but they sat on the property for over a year.
There's a question of whether or not we can control who an individual sells those improvements to.
Right, I was gonna add, and it also said they could sublease, so does that essentially render the waiting list I mean, again, then the person that owns the hangar controls it, or once they,
Oftentimes, I I don't find out that the hangar's sold until I actually notice that somebody moves in the building, and I get a hold of the old hangar owner and says, oh yeah, I sold that hangar, and I said, well, you were supposed to present me with a bill of sale so I could initiate a new lease, and then I go about it that way, so. Just one of the problems we run into.
Yeah, that's the complication.
So most likely, those 2 per year, they're not gonna actually become available to people on the waiting list.
No, someone sells them individually, and then I find out about it, or they do contact me and say, I'm gonna sell my hangar. We have one right now where the individual contact me, said, I'm thinking about selling my hangar, what do I have to do? And I say, all I need from you is a bill of sale, and then once I have the bill of sale, then I'll negotiate a new property lease with them.
Do they ever offer them to us, that we could buy the hangars?
No, we never have had anything.
Or do we, I mean,
We
again,
did-
it's
we did when
property.
We had hangars that we needed to be relocated, and we purchased those buildings, but that's been quite a few years back, hasn't it?
We've had a policy over the past few years of getting out of the landlord business, because most airports find that that's a time drain.
But again, they own the building, but they don't own the land. We own the land, correct?
Yeah.
So do we want, does it make sense? I mean, again, the hangar is their property, so they have that property right, but, I mean, do we want to give the person on the top of the list
A chance to buy
a
it?
chance? Again, I mean, I guess the owner gets to set the price. That's a tricky one. But again, it almost seems like the people on the waiting list should have a chance at those hangars that are being vacated.
I don't know how we.
Yeah, I mean, again,
That'd be the problem, I mean,
and maybe they get a right of first refusal. And if it doesn't, you know, if they can't meet the owner's terms, then they can sell it on the open market for whatever, but.
I think we should at least let everybody know, everyone who owns a hangar, if you want to sell, we have a list of people who are interested. At least offer the connection, so that, because if I had a hangar and I wanted to sell it, and I knew that you had a list of interested parties, I'd want to know about that list.
But
That's
it
where I would
sounds like
start.
in practice, that really doesn't generally happen. It's done
sometimes
privately.
it does, sometimes it doesn't. Some individuals are talked into selling their hangar by a partner who has an aircraft in that building. And say, well,
Okay, so
he
it goes-
might go to that one of his partners and say, I'm thinking about selling my hangar, are you interested? And that's how the sale goes.
do you have any advice on that one, what other airports do?
A lot of times these are treated not as completely separate situations, because one is new land being developed, here is a new hangar being built, and that's where the wait lists come into play. Because there are 1,001 what-ifs associated with selling a private hangar. Granted, you have, of all the hangars out there, anything that would be updated would not apply to their existing leases. But by going with the right of first refusal, going forward, the airport could always have the right of first refusal for purchasing at fair market value as established by the seller.
That gets hard.
What you can also find often, a lot of airports will actually have the wait list for hangars on their website. Not personal information, but I could go on there and see Jay Hill is number 17 on the wait list for a hangar site or for a tie-down spot. And that way and that's updated, part of the cost associated with the administrative fee is someone can easily log in and say, hey, okay, I was 17 last year and this year I'm 12. And they know where they're at. But it's often keeping these separate. The wait lists are for spaces, and then because of the unique aspect of privately owned structure on airport-owned land, it's really hard to say you have to.
Yeah, that gets pretty high.
It gets
Probably
a
too
lot of
complicated to
limits.
go there, yeah.
So often they're separate.
I do like the idea of having in our lease that we have first right of refusal. if somebobody's going to sell.
So you really want
Well,
the airport authority to have to buy it and go through all that
No.
and then
Then,
sell
then
it?
we've
Yeah.
got to find a way to fund that. If we-
Yeah,
I'm not saying that we would buy it, but what if we did? What if there were a spot where we needed to do some other expansion? It just puts us in the loop where they have to notify us, and we can always say, no, thanks. But it puts us in the loop where they have to tell us, we have first right. If let's say there were a few that we wanted to demolish and build something bigger or expand or move a road or
That's in
taxiway.
That's in the current lease.
Is that?
And we don't have to wait for them to decide to sell.
So being able to move
Oh,
it is.
that if we wanted to
So
use the
if-
property,
If
but,
at any point,
but they don't have to notify us
how
right
much
now.
notice do we have to give them? And then we have to buy it, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
30 days, and there's one that's 60 days, and there's one 30 day.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Short
that's
term.
already in the lease.
we don't have to wait for them to get ready to sell.
Well, you know, this first right of refusal thing would be problematic in the scenario that the partner wants to buy
Well, it
the
doesn't
hangar.
state first, right of refusal, it just says that we can terminate the lease, or the owner can terminate the lease when notification is received within 30 days.
So we have
What I'm
used
saying
even
is,
more.
though, if we were to implement something like that, what we're basically saying is, you can't sell your hangar to somebody else unless you give us the opportunity to buy it first. And that's not what we want to do.
I think at this point, we need to table this and get everyone a copy of the current lease so that they can, as Jeannie suggested, look at the two documents and we'll address this the next time we meet. Everyone in agreement with that? One question I had, on our current lease payments, are they ever paid to you, or are they paid, put in your mailbox, or are they paid here at the courthouse,
Most of them are paid at the finance department.
directly to the finance?
Every now and then, someone goes into the recorder's office or someplace else, and then we have to track them down.
Do you receive any payments at the mailbox out at the airport?
No,
Then
never received one payment at the mailbox at the airport.
you may want to think about that with Taylor, but that's where you're going to receive the $500 deposit. Because that's what,
Yeah.
that's what
Good point.
calls for.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I thought of that when I read that. That we should say that the payment needs to go to the same place all of our other payments go.
To the finance department.
Yeah.
I can make that change.
Lee Hanger report.
Okay, I know we're running out of time. I'll try to make this brief. Spoke with Judd on the status of the overlay project that we're trying to close out. FAA's received everything that they need to receive. They're just slow at moving forward. So we're basically just waiting on the FAA. There probably will be one more drawdown on this this grant for the 10% retainage, and then we'll be able to close this grant out. The airport relief grant for 59, I had to submit that 3 times. I hope that this third one takes. Every time I submit that, they decided they needed something else. So I think I have everything in to the Delphi system, and that they can process that, and we can also close that grant out. We just have received a new grant for the master plan project. That is grant 038. It's probably, a half a year longer than we anticipated in getting that grant approved and signed, but now it's in place, and the amount of that grant is $416,661 the FAA will put towards that project. Of course, we have a 5% match as the sponsor, and UDOT will kick in 5% like they do on all other FAA funded grants. Buildings and vehicle maintenance, the tractor that we leased for mowing had some problems, was out of commission for probably 3 weeks. That coupled by the amount of rain we received in the summer, which we normally don't receive, set our mowing operations back for probably a month. So we might have to lease this tractor for an additional month. Usually I turn it in at the end of September. We may have to keep that through October. I don't know if there will be an additional cost for that, but that's where.
It's out of service for 3 weeks.
But part of it being out of service was because of electronic problems with the tractor, so was not our problem, so.
Right, I'm saying that's.
So I'm hoping that we don't have to pay anything extra because of that. Also, speaking about leased equipment, right now we need to start looking at the loader that we're going to lease for the winter for the box blade. Last year we were blindsided and we had to pay $6,000 a month for that loader. I spoke with David on this when we were in the budget meeting, and it doesn't seem cost effective to be paying that kind of price for a loader when we probably should be buying one, or at least leasing with the option to buy. I don't know. Things have changed. I know there was a program a few years back where you could buy a front-end loader and then you could sell it back at the year of the end and actually make money on it, but I don't think those options are available anymore. So, but really, we need to look into probably purchasing our own loader at the airport, because $24,000 a year for loader, in a few years you could pay for your own loader to have at the airport. So I guess that's something that I need some guidance from the airport board on how they want me to move forward on that.
What are the options? Get the numbers.
Okay.
I'm going to refer to you to the gentleman that we use, I believe Logan City uses also, to help with financing vehicles. And he has relationships with most of the, if not all of the heavy equipment suppliers. And he could tell you some of the deals that are out there and what deals he's providing to cities as well.
Okay. I will look into that, and hopefully we will be able to rectify this problem with something better. Next on the list is the maintenance of the ARF truck. We've run into some maintenance items with the ARF truck, and at the recommendation of our 139 CERT inspector, we have to keep a better logs of the maintenance of this truck, and so the Logan City Fire Department has contracted with Sid Martin's group to maintain this fire truck. I questioned some of their costs on that, and I have the invoices here. In particular, I have a quote on the straps for the ladder on the back end. Those are two little small straps, and I'm receiving a quote of $455 to replace those. That seems a little high to me. And so
What happened with the tires? I mean, last time you were, I think,
last time we
concerned-
determined that we weren't going to replace the tires because there's no wear and tear on them.
They're stored indoors, and
Stored
so is that
indoors.
kind of okay with the maintenance folks?
Yes, and so now we have two items that we have to address. One is this strap, which is, that seems like an outlandish fee to just replace that strap, something they could send us and we could put on ourselves, and it wouldn't, probably be over $100 item. Also, we have the retractable extension floodlights that need to be replaced on the truck, and I have a quote for $11,765 for that. That's something that's going to have to be replaced on the truck. They were damaged a few years back when one of them was not retracted and run into the building, but now both of them don't work. But here again, that seems like a pretty high cost for those items on that truck.
Fire apparatus, correct? Anything fire-related, times by 3 for any other truck, unfortunately. And if you have no other options,
Okay. Well, if we have no other options, I guess we're going to have to approve these extensions. I think we need to look into getting those straps ourselves and just putting those on rather than to pay the $500 for them to come up and do it.
and that's a management decision.
For the lights, can we just buy those parts and install them ourselves?
Well, they're specialty items. No, I would have to go through a company like this to get them, you know.
Explore the options.
Okay, I'll work with you on that, see if we can't come up with better pricing or a different solution to this. New parking lot at the airport has been completed. We now have a total of 218 spaces out there, which is quite a bit more than we had, and this will allow us for the expansion of leading-edge aviation next summer and still have adequate parking space at the airport. So,
We were able to use the remaining funds from the RAPS tax grant that we received on the air overlay project. We didn't use all of that money on the runway, so we used the balance to complete this parking lot.
Third on my list is non-compliant items of our 139 CERT inspection. I had to send off a reply to our inspector about the sign panels or possibly replacing the signs on the taxiways. This is going to be an expensive item, and we were supposed to have a plan in place by the end of August, which we didn't. But that's primarily due to we have not met with UDOT or the FAA in updating our CIP. I talked with Judd on this, and we're scheduled sometime in September to have a meeting with the FAA to update our CIP, and I believe that we will try to fit this project into that planning process. We'll have to determine whether we want to actually replace the signs or just the panels in that meeting. Another thing that we're going to have to be looking at, October 31st is the due date that we're supposed to have a plan in place for updating our snow removal equipment. They'll have to respond back to the FAA in regards to that also. And then the last item was the training requirements for the POCC operations people that maintain our instrument landing system at the airport. I can't force them to come out and train, but I guess when I see them show up, I'll just have to grab them on a one by one basis and say, look, you need to drive with me on the airport, and I need to fill out this form to say that you've been trained. That's the best I can do, because I can't get them all to show up at one time, nor am I allowed to send the curriculum down to them and have them self-train anymore. Any questions with my report?
I have one more general question. Logan City is trying to track kind of the carbon footprint of public properties within our boundaries. My conservation coordinator, sustainability director is trying to track that down. She has a few questions. Would you be the one to answer that? Who shall I direct her to with that? I mean, do you want to go to the consultant? She's just trying to, again, she's kind of got this spreadsheet, some software that has some certain questions to ask to try and, get a rough idea.
For public businesses?
It's basically for our in-house use. But we're trying to kind of track carbon footprints at like our landfill, at the airport, at on our, our city buildings.
Yeah, she could certainly send me the questionnaire sheet. If I can't answer it, I could consult with Armstrong, and I'm sure we could come up with a.
She may just give you a call, and her name's Emily Malik.
Okay.
Any other questions? Judd, we talked about the grant for the master plan. Review that for us in the,
Very quickly. So, very quickly, I think it was in March, said that the master plan is, oh. Said the master plan was about ready. They were expecting to issue the grant. And then April, May, June, July, August. Finally, in August, they actually got the grant out. So they were 6 months behind or on schedule with everything from years past. When it comes to the actual master plan, it's going to be a very detailed process to come up with a long-term plan, just like a city or a county plan. It's a 20-year plan to develop the outlook for the explicit to the airport. When it comes to, this is a very brief flow chart of what's happening. We're finally through actually getting the grant. We were hoping that to happen in, like I said, March or April. The FAA finally issued it this past month. And thank you all for getting it signed. It's an arduous task to get it through all the different people. So thank you for making that happen. The next major step is to develop a technical advisory committee. And this is a group that we will work most closely with developing the plan for the airport moving forward. Technical advisory committees usually range anywhere from about 4 to 7 people, give or take. They're a combination of the airport sponsors, potential stakeholders, members of the community. There is no one-size-fits-all. It's what works best for your community and your airport. But that technical advisory committee will have several meetings throughout the process. They will review all of the documentation as it gets put forward. So that will be the next major step, is to identify who's going to be on the TAC committee. And then we'll figure out, working with that TAC, what level. There's going to be multiple opportunities for public involvement throughout the process. But to what level those happen will be developed with the TAC's input. And then the first meeting would be a kickoff meeting. So if you find yourself on the TAC, you'll see this slide again at the kickoff meeting. And then the dark blue bullet points are the different chapters of the airport master plan. And the inventory, the forecast is basically what do you have now, where the forecast has to be approved by the FAA, but all of these, the first couple develop into the first working paper. And that would be reviewed by the TAC and then submitted for review through the FAA. Facility requirements are what will you need. Again, another working paper developed with review by the TAC and feedback from the TAC. Then development alternatives. We'll by this point be able to come up with, here's different ideas. Again, another working paper to reviewed by the TAC, as well as another meeting, also including an open house for all of the airport users and the general public to come see what's happening at the airport. Finally, additional working papers and the overall plan being finalized. A third meeting with the TAC, and then everything submitted to the FAA for formal review. So the TAC is a very important component, and it will require some time and effort because of reviewing the papers, coming to a handful of meetings. Again, this will be spread over a year plus, but it is a commitment that will help develop the 20-year plan for the airport.
Are you wanting suggestions for that? mean, did we talk about, and Brett's not here, so we'll need to, I just think Brett would be a really good person to have on that technical advisory committee. I mean, again, he's a user, he's the CFO, so he also gets financial picture. I think he would be a good person on this board, at least for one of the members, if he's willing to do it, of course.
It's a good suggestion.
I think so too.
Chamber of Commerce representative,
Or
FPO.
you've got your, I mean, you've got your county development director, you know, economic development director.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And that
And
might-
he has some airport experience. So, good suggestion.
How many people total are you envisioning on the
Said
tab?
For
4 to
this,
7. If
4
you
to,
get it too
and,
big,
yeah,
not
it's
big.
the, big enough to make sure you have a wide swath, small enough that you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen. 5 to 7 is pretty common.
I might like our Public Works Director to serve, or maybe Logan's Public Works Director, somebody with some engineering, infrastructure experience.
That could be a really good help, I think, if Logan Public Works were involved, because they're going to have to oversee all of the infrastructure
It's a very
that it involves.
useful position to be involved.
I'll ask Paul, and he's so busy. But
Mine is too. Maybe they could tag team or something, I don't know.
Think about that.
So that's something that will be worked out within the next couple of weeks.
And there may be somebody that could provide that input that,
Or the Logan City engineer, maybe, your new engineer. So
Yeah,
just,
um,
I'm just thinking
yeah,
somebody,
or we do have a program.
somebody on our side who's gonna say, well, this is how we do our infrastructure, or in order for it to work with what we're already doing. Just somebody who has that local perspective.
I mean, Sean, are you kind of willing, does that seem like a good fit for you if we were to ask you to serve on that?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So does someone need to reach out to Brett? I mean, as
Yeah.
the chair, do you?
there's a formal invitation that is sent out.
How soon do you need this group together?
We are already,
Yeah.
of course, we never started working before we got a grant, but we're actually well into the inventory chapters, the introduction and the inventory chapters. So as soon as possible, we can kick things off. I would say shoot for sometime during the month of September. Having that kickoff meeting would be an appropriate time.
How many more people do we need to identify?
We've got the number. And now it's just whether or not do we,
Whether they'll do it or
If
not.
there's one more spot, one other idea, somebody who I think would be helpful, Ryan Snow, he's the city manager for Providence, but he's previously managed an airport. He's a pilot himself, and he's a city administrator, so he understands budgets and finance and infrastructure and all of those things, so he might be helpful. He's mentioned to me that he's willing to help with airport stuff.
Okay. Yeah, and this is one where, from our perspective, not to dodge responsibility, but we do our best to not recommend anyone, because it really is whom do you feel is best representative of your airport users, and the community.
I mean, do we need someone from Utah State on that committee, because they're one of our biggest users and have potential for, or someone from EP Systems? I mean, if we're really moving in the direction of, electrifying a lot of things at the airport, they might be also key players in
Yeah.
terms of,
I was thinking the same thing.
so,
One of these two gentlemen wants to serve.
We
And
could
that-
definitely advise on the future of electrification, partnering with Utah State, we'll collaborate or tag team that, but we'd be happy to advise as necessary with somebody on the committee as well.
so again, with Brett, you have the airport board represented, you have a corporate user represented. So if we got Utah State, again, I mean, what's your thought about having kind of a public works person? I mean, does that make sense?
It does. That's a very common position that you find, just because of their broad knowledge of infrastructures that tie into the airport, whether it be road, sewage, water, electric. they kind of have the larger picture outside of the airport property.
And you envisioned, you said 4 to 5 meetings over the next year and reviewing documents?
It probably, well, formal meetings, there'd be 3. And then we work at the speed of the committee. Usually, it's good to get turnaround on working papers in about 2 weeks, give or take. There's not any particular timeline, but it's just to keep things moving. There's not a need to have them sit on someone's desk for 6 weeks. So it's usually an arbitrary, if you can get this back in about 2 weeks.
That's helpful to know kind of the parameters. So does that kind of give you enough guidance as chair to reach out to those people and create that task force?
I think so.
Do you
If-
have any other suggestions in terms of the types of representation? Or do you think we're pretty much headed in the right?
I think you're headed in the right direction. Obviously, I mean, I think it goes without saying, but Lee, your future manager,
Calls from North Logan, planning, development department, and probably Smithfield, and cities that are impacted by the airport, maybe they might need some representation there.
And I hesitate to get this committee too big. Maybe we should have the county public works director, because then they're kind of the umbrella over everybody, rather than Logan. I don't know on that one.
Well, I would love to have one or the other of them. And maybe we can just
Like
find
I
out
said,
this
utilities
information,
do
but
come
yeah.
from Logan, so.
That's my thought for having a Logan representative is they're gonna know about the water lines, the sewer lines, the storm drainage,
Yeah, I'll talk to
road
Paul
master
and
plans.
let you know, or if he thinks someone else in his department.
Let me know. Okay. There will be opportunities for a lot of other people to give input during the public process.
And again, I'm assuming whoever is the new director, I mean, the airport director needs to be on the committee, whether it's you or the new person.
The TAC is really a steering committee or a screening committee. They don't have any authority, and all they do is try to streamline the process leading up to the periods of public involvement. And the authority board will receive timely updates as well as this is where we are, this is what we've done so far. And they'll have the chance to be apprised of the progress. You had a lot of cars parked out there, Aaron. What was that event?
That event was the dean invited all the teachers from the College of Ag and Applied Science to come down and get a pep rally for the new semester. You can do this, don't be afraid of the students type of a deal.
It's a great place to work if you didn't have to deal with the students. Uh-huh. And you've got
Hey, some of them get grants, so they don't want to deal with students anyway.
Oh, okay. And Baron, you've got something coming up on the 17th.
We sure do. I brought a flyer in here. So Girls in Aviation Day on the 17th. We normally bring about 100 young ladies ages 8 to 18 to the airport. It's a great opportunity for them to see aviation and STEM and also to see the airport. And I think it's a great community program to do. We've been doing it 6 years in a row now. We went virtual 1 year during COVID, but this will be our 7th year doing it with 6 years at the airport.
And they won't have to park in the mud this time.
We appreciate that. There's 180 new spots out there on the asphalt at Camden, so that's going to be a wonderful opportunity. And I think it'll be great for our events out there.
Well, we'll see how they deal with the charter tomorrow. We may have to show some of those people how to park, but at least there are some lines there to give them some general guidance. So, any other items? Again, appreciate your being here and your interest in the airport. We'll stand adjourned.
You can just delete those other.